Hello, one and all. It's time for another online commentary track on a Generation 1 episode with me, Chris Mcfeely, back with you after a slight absence. Well, I suppose if you're listening to this through Moonbase 2, then it probably doesn't seem like that much of an absence for you, but it's been a while since I recorded one of these, I'll tell you that. For this track, I've chosen to go with the Season 3 episode, Call of the Primitives. One of the most famous Season 3 episodes. I'm a big fan of Season 3, and maybe I'm monopolising it when it comes to these commentaries. It is 2 against 1 for Season 3 now at this point, but this episode is certainly one of the most famous key episodes out of Season 3, for good or for ill. For good and for ill. And I want to talk about it. So, this episode is written by Don F. Glut, who wrote a lot of other episodes for the series, like Divide and Conquer, SOS Dinobots, Dinobot Island, a lot of the Dinobot-centric episodes the man has written. He's a big fan of dinosaurs in real life. Not that big a fan of Transformers in real life. Has expressed a lot of cynicism and bitter old man crankiness about the series in recent years, but let us not dwell on the negative and instead talk about the lovely, because look at this animation. This is, it's widely held up as the best animated episode of Transformers, of Generation 1, and it's certainly hard to argue that the fluidity and the colours and the line work, it is. But the characters all seem to be drawn based on slightly different animation models. They have some measure of similarity to the models used by Studio Ox, who drew a lot of illustrations for TV Magazine and Comic Bomb Bomb in Japan. I've never really sat down and compared them. I don't think they're absolutely identical, but they're not on model, if you know what I mean. They don't look like the rest of the cartoon. I would say that the episode with the best on-model animation would be The Dweller in the Depths, which is also from Season 3. I don't know, people always say Season 3 has really bad animation, and yeah, okay, the ACOM animated episodes are fetid, but they're only about 50. There was Wind Charger just ran by in the background, and he was supposed to have died during the movie, but there he is, and it's hard to discount his appearance in this whenever you see how much good animation that this episode has. It's not prone to mistakes, I mean, even the best animated episodes have their fair share of mistakes, but this episode is very light, even on mistakes. Like, the quality of the animation is not just limited to the line work. There's a lot of care has clearly gone into it. Unicron's head really shouldn't be that close to Cybertron at this stage. It got blown out of orbit back during Ghost in the Machine, but as far as errors go, as I said, it's certainly one that we can probably let slide. That was probably just on a cosmic scope. That's just how large Tornadron is. Yeah, that'll do. So yeah, the animation of this episode, it's generally thought that this was animated by a Japanese studio called Tokyo Movie Shinsa, but no one seems to be entirely sure where that came from, because it's certainly not been confirmed with 100% certainty. But there you are. You'll see people saying it anyway, so now you know why, if nothing else. Transformers normally was animated by Toei Animation, who did most of Season 2, and ACOM, which was a Korean company owned by Nelson Shin, who was one of the show's directors, producers. And ACOM usually did worse work, Toei normally did nicer work, and then there's this one episode that just is stellar, so it's generally assumed it was done by somebody else, and TMS, Tokyo Movie, are the elected supposed animators who were behind this episode. I'm waffling. Galvatron's wearing a red Decepticon symbol. Again, one of very few errors, but there it is. See, most of the really interesting stuff about this episode doesn't happen until a little bit later into it. And some of the retcons that were later propagated. That's Aaron Kincaid provides the voice of Skylynx. Not really known for a lot of other work, but as far as animation goes, he was the voice of Killer Croc in the Batman animated series in the 1990s. But conversely, that's Brad Garrett as the voice of Trypticon, who I think everybody must surely know in this day and age as Robert on Everybody Loves Raymond. Slugfest and Overkill make a rather bizarre one-scene appearance in this episode. Goodness knows why, honestly. And they're missing the weapons that are usually plugged into their sides. And there was Slugfest again in the middle of that lineup, but after that, that's it. You don't see him again. So why they were... I would assume it's probably some sort of silly Hasbro mandate where they wanted them in the show, but nobody knew what to do with them. Trypticon's chest. If you've ever wondered why Trypticon's chest looks like a little car, it's because on the toy, that's what it is. It's a little car named Full Tilt who could transform into a robot and everything, but for some reason he was never incorporated into the cartoon in any way, and he just sits there looking like a car without ever being a car. That's Jack Angel provides the voice of Ultra Magnus in Season 3, replacing Robert Stack from the film. And the old cast just sort of gets shuffled aside for the course of this episode so that the primitives can take center stage. So this, I think everybody pretty much assumes this is supposed to be Earth and its moon. Never explicitly stated, but there you go. So I can't recall if this creature has been named yet or not in the episode. I'm not listening very closely to the dialogue because I'm chatting away here, but its name is Tornedron, not Tornatron or Tornitron. Tornedron. So there you go. You know, I've just had a brainwave that I never really thought of before. I often wondered why in the Japanese Headmaster series, when Transformers like Soundwave and Blaster died, they went entirely white instead of turning shades of grey like Optimus Prime did when he died. And I've just wondered, I wonder if they were taking their cue from this episode where the Transformers all turn entirely white whenever they're sucked of their energy instead of getting multiple tones of grey. I see you learned something new. I gotta be honest, I can't remember who voices any of the Predacons. The voice cast got a lot more diverse in the third season, and a lot of guys doing weird bit parts that didn't. I confess, I would have to look it up. The Dinobots get to act a little bit more badass in this episode, which is good. Because Season 3 had relegated them to comedy characters, using their low intelligence for comedy instead of making them like the dangerous wildcards that they were in Seasons 1 and 2. And of course, unfortunately, this episode falls into the same trap for the conclusion, because the whole gist of this episode is, they're stupid, and that makes them smart. Which is tiresome, and it doesn't work with Skylynx, really. I mean, he might turn into an animal, but he's not dumb. But then I suppose he's like the second guy who gets his energy drained by Trypticon. So I guess that sort of proves my point, then, doesn't it? So this is where the strangeness really starts to come in. They land on this planet, and one of the first things that they see is where is it now? Well, See, I think that shot seems like it's a mistake. It seems to me like we're really not supposed to have seen Primacron yet in the episode, because they treat his appearance at the very end like a shock, like, holy crap, look, he was actually this tiny little fish monkey all along. It seems like we really weren't supposed to see his face there, and somebody slipped up. But where is this creature that they see another entity here? Where is it? Come on. There it is. Now, this creature, it ties into what we're about to see. I don't think it's supposed to be Tornatron. I mean, it's glowing orange like he is, so I don't believe that's what it's supposed to be. It's just supposed to be some sort of projection. Maybe it's supposed to lure the primitives where they need to go. But this, as we will see in the upcoming flashback, it's not openly and clearly stated, but that is the physical form, or that was the physical form of Primacron's assistant. And it's some sort of silly monkey thing. But, okay, yeah, they're about to walk into this cave now, and Skylinks delivers his immortal line, all is well, and then it just dives straight in when the assistant pops up. The assistant, I'm gonna start calling the assistant the Oracle now at this point, because that is the name for the character in the episode script and on his animation model. Yep, there he is. He's a lava lamp. And it's easier to say, the Oracle. And it's also a large part of that is part of the big crazy retcon that happened with this episode. So, the Oracle begins to tell his story of Primacron, and you can see in this story his okay, now see there he is, yeah. And he's just made that really strange claim that years ago Primacron created some of the primitives, which, the way it's phrased makes it sound like it's supposed to be talking about the assembled primitives in front of him, which doesn't make any sense, because we know who built the Dinobots. The cassettes were Decepticons. Admittedly, we don't really know who built, as far as internal to the cartoon itself, we don't know where the Predacons or the Terracons came from. Speaking of not knowing things, I'll come back to that weird scene in a minute. But the notes, the cast notes for this episode explain, or do their best to explain, that the Oracle is the life force of a former primitive. So there are other primitives. There were primitives before these primitives assembled here. I don't think the line of dialogue is supposed to be referring to these primitives, although it's not very well laid out. Likewise, that absolutely bizarre scene in which the Matrix rises out of the shattered remains of the Oracle's body. Again, because the animation is so good in this episode, you're not really willing to discount it as a mistake out of hand, which you normally would have in other episodes, because it's such a specific thing to happen. But I don't know. There's really no way to take that. There's no right way to take that scene internal to this episode. It is just baffling. Yeah. But one thing that this whole episode highlights, which I really like about the Generation 1 cartoon, is it's Unicron's origin. Now, I'm not saying that I'm all for Unicron being the creation of a fish monkey, but it's very consistent with the cartoon's portrayal of Transformers. Transformers, the cartoon, whereas the comic would introduce the Matrix and had Unicron and Primus as gods and responsible. There's a lot of mysticism in the Transformers comic. The Transformers cartoon does not generally go in for that. The origins of the Transformers and a lot of their related concepts are just, honest to God, they're tales of technology gone wrong. They're not magic energy beings in robot shells, which is kind of how things are now with the concept of sparks and the magic of the Matrix. There are robots who rebelled against their masters. That's what the Transformers are. That's what Unicron is. Transformers don't have to be mystically brought to life. The Transformers are just programmed. When it was introduced, really, Vector Sigma wasn't magic. It was just a supercomputer that was the only thing advanced enough to successfully program a proper mind. It's like Wheeljack couldn't, so that's why the Dinobots are dumb. The Constructicons couldn't, so that's why Trypticon is dumb. There's a consistency there if you look for it. If you take these disparate things as being canonically meaningful instead of the whims of whoever was writing the episodes at the time. But I have always liked that consistency in the cartoon, that it is tales of technology gone wrong and not tales of gods, apostles sent out to protect the universe from Satan, which is essentially what the Marvel Comics origin of the thing is. Of course, since all of this went down, as everybody probably knows at this stage, the Marvel Comics origin with Unicron and Primus as the forces of good and evil in the universe and what have you, that's become like multiversally consistent and canonical across all universes. It's supposed to be like the group origin for Transformers in all of reality. And I don't really have a problem with that. I like the multiversal aspect of the whole thing. I'm not particularly against it. But of course it doesn't work with the Generation 1 cartoon, you know. While the BotCon comics for the Beast Wars continuity offered some sort of explanation for how the Primus origin from the comic and the Quintesson origin from the cartoon could be reconciled, nothing as of yet has ever tried to explain how Unicron the God was created by Primacron the fish monkey. You know, I mean, for example, if you were to question me and I was sat here, I would say that, you know, perhaps Unicron mind-controlled Primacron or made a bargain with him, Unicron, known for making bargains with lesser creatures, and got him to build the body for him. You know, perhaps, you know, I don't know why he would need his body built in this reality. Perhaps it's just the way it turned out. So that's what happened. Unicron had Primacron build his body. That works for me. That's how I deal with it. If I ever get to write anything officially, I will write that. But as I was saying earlier, some of the most interesting things about the story in this episode is what was retconned into the whole story later by Takara in 2007, because when Takara produced their Kiss Players storyline, I'm not going to get into the horribleness of Kiss Players here and now, but in its second year, Kiss Players became incredibly fan-wanky and told some really complex continuity, chronology, multiverse-spanning storylines. And it also introduced Primus into the Generation 1 universe of Japan, because previously, you know, Japan had never had the comics, so they'd never known Primus. They had first met Primus whenever he was introduced in the Unicron trilogy cartoons in Energon and Cybertron. And they tie it in very intrinsically with what happens in this episode. The way the retcon works is that is the honest-to-God Matrix escaping from the body of Primacron's assistant. It contains his essence. It flies off to a dead world. This is the dead world that we see in this episode. And it goes on to eventually use its powers to transform that dead world into Cybertron. And then the Quintessons find the planet. They enslave the Oracle, as he's called. They harness his essence and turn him into Vector Sigma, and thereby drawing the correlation between the Beast Machine's Oracle, the G1 Oracle, and Vector Sigma as well. But and that entity is also Primus. Primacron's assistant is Primus in Japanese Generation 1 continuity, believe it or not. But then for that to work, they had the timeline that was included in the graphic novel collection of all the Kiss Players and Teletran 15 Go-Go manga, had to involve some rather unnecessary time travel. It's said that while he was on his dead world, before he turned it into Cybertron, the Oracle sensed that Primacron would create another creature again in the future, and so he summoned the primitives back in time to his dead world to fill them in on the story. It's really roundabout, but it's amazing, you know, I mean, yes, this episode reveals the origin of Unicron in the cartoon, so that makes it very significant in and of itself, but it's just amazing how much stuff was later focused on it to try and warp it into so many different continuities. And I have really not talked about anything that's been happening on screen for like the last 10 minutes, and now the episode is over. Look, Grimlock, you're funny and stupid. Oh, hey, a Secret Files of Teletron too. I forgot this was on here. On cassette technology. Not exactly ill-fitting after a primitive-centric episode with quite a few cassettes in it. Yeah, these secret files were usually included on the episodes that were running short in order to bring them up to the full required running time. Although it's hard to imagine that anything would have been cut from Call of the Primitives for quality's sake, because the animation is just so well done in it. I guess maybe it was just the script was as tight as it was, and it did everything it needed to do, and it needed to fill out a little more time. I would like to take this opportunity to say that I love Rat-Bat, since we're looking at cassettes here and everything. But then this is almost a case of how underrepresented the Autobot cassettes are, because there's this shot here of eject and rewind. But they had to use a shot of Ramhorn transforming. They don't even have any footage of eject, because he is so scarcely used in the cartoon and never speaks even. And that's Call of the Primitives, which I guess was really more of a history lesson, and as far as commentaries go, instead of me directly commenting on what was happening in front of you. But hopefully it was quite informative anyway. And yeah, well, I guess that's that. You can make up your mind about what you think about all of that, and I will see you later. Bye now.